Black men, we get confused as to what strength is. And sometimes we think that standing behind a black woman as a leader does not display strength as black men. I thought that was, I guess that's part of the reason why you want a space like that, to say that something like that, that maybe you wouldn't say in mixed company, for lack of a better phrase.
Absolutely. I'm the father of a 24-year-old black woman who's in law school right now, and I want to encourage her to use that training to reach for the highest heights. And how can I do that if I don't fully support somebody with the type of background and experience as Kamala Harris to achieve the presidency and to be able to one day stand up and call her Madam President? And if I don't fully support that, I, as a black dad to a black a young woman, I'm not doing my job.
So let me ask you this, though. You've seen some of the polls, right? There's some Pew Research Center reported in April that there's been a slight uptick in black men who identify as Republicans in 2024 compared to 2020. Much has been made of this very minor shift because I guess we haven't seen something like this. It is minor. But why do you think Donald Trump has appeal to some black men beyond, beyond what you suggested, which is perhaps some misogyny?
Well, I think, again, black men through both Democrat and Republican administrations have been on the wrong side of many statistics, whether it's healthcare, incarceration rates, unemployment rates, and it's nothing new. And so I think he strategically senses a vulnerability there that he can attack. He tried to equate himself to the circumstance of black men who have been mistreated by the justice system, yet most black men haven't had the privilege of being able to appoint judges that preside over their criminal cases, that are able to dismiss their criminal cases. And so the notion that he could liken himself to black men who have been mistreated by the justice system is ridiculous, frankly ridiculous. Most black men have not been all black men have not been able to appoint the Supreme Court justices that have come down with rulings in his favor.
Yeah.
Gender identity is a highly debated subject, particularly when it intersects with sports.
Well, I've been talking to my dad, who reminded me that when he was growing up in the 70s and 80s, this is the racist, far-right, fascist violence that they had to deal with growing up. And now we are seeing violence descend upon towns and cities across the country. And we need to call this racist, and we need to call it Islamophobic, because if we don't, we fail to really address what's going on. And language is really important. I noticed that the Daily Telegraph were calling it a counter-protest by Muslims. No, you have one side that is burning down citizens' advice bureaus, libraries, targeting mosques, attacking black and brown people who are walking in their communities, targeting women who are wearing the hijab, and you have others who are defending their communities and standing up when they are finding no other help. So we really need to be quite clear about what's going on. And I have to say that it shouldn't be a surprise that this has happened. There is decades of work by the right-wing press and by politicians who have fanned the flames of this hate. When we look at the role that media outlets like GB News has played, that the Daily Mail has played.
Well, hang on, what has my newspaper done? What has my newspaper
done? So if we look
done?
at the front pages of the Daily Mail, and if we look at the language that has been used by outlets like the Daily Mail, and as well as
Can you give me an example? Can you give me an example?
I can give you a number of examples.
Come on, give me one now.
The language around refugees
let's have one now.
And Muslims
let's have one now.
Dehumanizing. So what I'm saying is there are politicians.
Do you have
and
an example?
There are politicians and there are journalists who have played an active role in fanning the flames of hate and division, and we are seeing that play out.
Just pause for a second, because you did specifically mention the Daily Mail.
Could you tell me what specifically?
Is the specific thing?
I can list a number of headlines to Andrew after the show, because I think this has taken up a lot of time. But what I would say is that media outlets and journalists, as well as politicians, we had a former Home Secretary who referred to refugees as an invasion. We've had Nigel Farage, also on GB News, saying that British Muslims don't have the same values, don't share British values. So when we look at the complicity, we have to be, there's a lot of mirrors that people need to be looking into. And I think also the role that ITV has also played in terms of inviting Nigel Farage, allowing him to rehabilitate his image.
Judge Sarah encountered significant backlash after permitting a male convicted sex offender to be placed in a women's prison after they identified as a woman.
But we start with allegations in a new lawsuit against Google. A black former Google employee filing the lawsuit against the tech giant. We heard from attorneys in just the last hour on their claims. KPX5's Jocelyn Moran has been listening to this for us. And Jocelyn, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, well, Amanda, the press conference detailing the lawsuit is still going on. The complaint alleges things from Google paying black employees less to more often requiring them to show identification. Now, civil rights attorney Ben Crump, along with others, is leading this lawsuit. He says they filed the lawsuit seeking class action status. Former Google employee April Christina Curley spoke today. She says in 2014, she was sought by Google and landed her dream job as a diversity recruiter on the university programs team. Curley says she felt compelled to be vocal about the treatment of black employees and what she says are racist policies and behaviors. She says she was terminated after she was speaking up.
After dedicating so much of my life to ensure black and brown students had access to opportunities in tech and at Google, after being restrained to an entry-level classification for 6 years, after being blocked for promotion because, and I quote, Google had no budget to pay me, Google decided that the right next step in my career was to unjustly terminate me.
Now, Google's most recent diversity report shows that just 4.4% of its U.S. workers were black. We reached out to Google. We did not get an immediate response back. In the newsroom, I'm Jocelyn Moran, KPIX5.
Jocelyn, we'll keep our eyes on this case. Thanks so much.
This ruling sparked a heated discussion about the consequences of such policies.
More than 40,000 black men gathered for a video call one day after Vice President Harris announced that she would be running for the Democratic presidential nomination. The call lasted 4 hours and raised more than $1.3 million for Harris's campaign. But maybe more importantly, it allowed the group to discuss what her campaign required of them. Data shows black men have been reliably Democratic voters. But one man on the call felt that it was important to highlight a small group of black men who have historically resisted supporting black women seeking positions of power. Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul was the one to stand up on that call, and he joins us now to talk more about what was discussed that day. Thank you so much for joining us. So this call followed a Black Women for Kamala Harris phone call, which, I was blown away by the numbers, and then black men did even better, I think. But I'm curious about why you felt it was important to have a gathering like this, a space of all black men to discuss with the candidate, what they needed.
Yeah, well, there are all sorts of issues where black men are disproportionately on the bad end of statistics. And I think there's a sense of excitement for Kamala Harris, and that's why quickly black men were able to gather and raise the type of money that you referenced earlier. However, there's been a concerted effort to undermine the support for Kamala Harris amongst black men with misinformation with regards to her role as a prosecutor and her role as a California Attorney General, with regards to the incarceration of black males, playing on a sensitivity that I think it's not unique to black culture, but the misogyny of a few who are reluctant to support the leadership of a woman. And I want to reiterate, I don't think it's something that's unique to black culture. I think it's widespread throughout many cultures that some men are reluctant to support a woman, thinking that it weakens their stature as a leader. And I wanted to confront that.
Yeah, your quote I thought was really interesting. You said,
Aiden Gallagher, a transgender woman, secured a girls' state track championship in Oregon, adding more fuel to the ongoing controversy.
Racist abuse and bullying, those are the realities of being a black British woman in the army, according to former Armed Forces poster girl, Kerry-Ann Knight.
Yeah, having been initially excited to join up, she said it wasn't long before she experienced abuse and would now no longer recommend the military as a job, especially for women of colour. Talking to Kerry-Ann Knight in just a moment. First, Kira Durkin has her story.
She was the poster girl for the British Army, trying to bring in more diversity through the Army's Black and Minority Ethnic Network, encouraging others to follow in her footsteps and serve the country. But what started out as her dream job turned into a living hell. Over the course of her 12-year career, Kerry-Ann Knight faced sexism and racist abuse from her colleagues. Boxes would be piled high on her desk, so she was unable to work. Incidents like this made Kerry-Ann feel bullied and unwelcome, leading her to the decision to launch an official service complaint. Last week, she was offered a substantial payout by the Ministry of Defence, alongside an apology from the Army. But despite this, there was still no admission of liability. Now, Kerry-Ann says she's left feeling disheartened and fears the Army will never change.
Well, joining us now is Kerry-Ann Knight, and also here in the studio, Emma Norton, a lawyer at the Centre for Military Justice who represented Kerry-Ann. Let's come to you first of all, Kerry-Ann. Hearing some of what you went to makes you sick to your stomach, frankly, that what you had to go to, but there seems an extra poignancy and awfulness about the fact that you were there as poster girl for the Army and black women and black people in the Army at the time, which makes it even more difficult to bear, I should imagine. Give us a sense of some of the things that you went through.
Good morning, Kate. Yes, that's right. As the poster girl, I guess I wasn't living the life I was displaying on the posters and in the promotional videos. My experience pretty much varied from...
Many questioned the fairness of this win due to the biological differences between transgender women and cisgender women.
I worked for FedEx for 12 and a half years.
For years, Jennifer Harris climbed the FedEx corporate sales ladder. During her career, she won numerous company awards, including the top award more than once.
People go their entire career and never accomplish President's Club. So being able to do that twice.
But Jennifer says awards didn't stop workplace discrimination, and it all started with this from a supervisor.
You have been very successful as an account executive, and it doesn't seem as if you love your job, that you should consider, going back to something that you love.
Jennifer eventually turned to this father-daughter attorney team for help. Their lawsuit alleges, after filing a complaint with Human Resources, the investigation was not handled properly and her treatment at work worsened. As further retaliation, her employment was subsequently terminated.
That hits you in the heart.
Civil rights attorney Brian Sanford and his daughter Bibi took on an entire team of corporate FedEx attorneys.
Jennifer doesn't get to say anything until she's on the stand. She just has to watch me and Dad put on her case. And she has to watch the FedEx attorneys try to rip her to shreds.
Bibi and her father convinced jurors to rule in their favor. The jury's $365 million judgment surprised them and the judge.
When the judge got to one of the big numbers, he took off his glasses and he looked down and he looked back up.
FedEx responded saying, "We strongly disagree with the verdict and will appeal." FedEx does not engage in or tolerate retaliation. We followed our protocols for performance management with Ms. Harris and are confident that we acted properly regarding her termination. Now, Jennifer encourages others in the same situation.
Figure out a way to at least give it your best shot to fight.
In Fort Worth, I'm Scoop Jefferson.
Francesca, a passionate supporter of transgender rights, strongly believes that transgender women should be allowed to compete in women's sports, stressing the importance of inclusivity and equality.
Improve the equipment, help them pay taxes, and I'm not saying it's a whole holistic fix, but it's certainly a huge thumb up for us. And Amy, we're still pushing for the $5 billion in debt relief. So I'm asking the administration to do that by executive order. That's what I've been having conversations with the White House to still get the $5 billion. That's the land that's owned by many Black farmers that have their deeds of trust tied up with the United States Department of Agriculture. And again, that's a decade-old request as well.
And could you explain the difference between the payments and the debt relief?
Absolutely. The payments, like you heard Secretary Vilsack mention, it was those Black farmers and farmers of color who experienced discrimination prior to 2021. So that was just about everybody in our organization that fit that definition. So that piece was totally separate than the actual debt relief, which is 120% we were promised. Black farmers who were eligible for that were sent the necessary form in the mail telling them how much debt relief they were going to get, and the 20% to pay their taxes. All of our members sent them back in, and then after that, white farmers started suing us in federal court around the country in numerous federal courts and 2 temporary injunctions, one in Florida and the other in Texas, blocking the $5 billion in debt relief to Black and other farmers of color. And then we began to file motions in federal court, and after we began to make some traction there, a few wins, the administration repealed it by an act of Congress and replaced it with some of these other measures. So we still want our land, like you talked about at the beginning of the show. We've, at the turn of the century, owned 20 million acres of land. Today, we're down as Black farmers, 3.5 million acres. At the turn of the century, we were tilling, there were 1 million Black farm families in the United States. Today, we're down to about 50,000 full-time Black farmers. So the land, as my daddy and grandfather taught me, the land is everything. The land is food, the land is water, the land is timber to build houses on. Everything comes great from the land, and we want our land. And that's what I've been after for this whole campaign, and I spoke to you about it before.
John, you mentioned your father. You are a 4th-generation Black farmer. Can you describe your own experience of discrimination? You don't often talk about that in your national interviews.
You're right, and I want to give a thumbs up to my daddy, the greatest man I knew in the flesh. Not because he had any money, but because the way he carried himself. He was a dignified, humble Black farmer that worked hard every day. Every day that pickup truck rolled in the turn, man, he was ready to go to work. And we worked sun up to sundown together and said very few words. But the discrimination that I faced at USDA was in-your-face discrimination. I was spat on with tobacco juice running down my shirt on one particular loan application with the lender, who was a federal employee who was employed by a government, spat on me. I was called the N-word from this same...
Piers Morgan holds an opposing view, arguing against the participation of transgender women in women's sports.
And we start on New tonight at 10 as a Colorado woman is suing one of the largest banks in the country, claiming racial discrimination.
At 61 years old, Janetta Vaughn says she was racially profiled at a branch in Aurora, resulting in the manager calling the police on her for banking while Black, basically using police as intimidation. Tonight, she's sharing her side of the story.
It was June 9th of last year when 2 Aurora officers were called to this Chase Bank on Buckley Road for a trespassing call.
Am I the one she called the police on? Yeah, exactly.
Let's back up. The incident started when Janetta Vaughn walked into the branch that morning to get checks from a teller. You can see her on bank surveillance walking in. Vaughn telling Fox 31 she sat in a chair to unlock her bank card, which she says she keeps locked for security reasons as a former government employee. Then she was approached by the bank manager, who asked if she needed anything.
I told her, I says, no, I'm unlocking my card, on my phone, and then I'm going to go up and do my business.
The complaint states that the manager then stated, "You don't need to be rude."
She says, well, you're not welcome here. I'm the branch manager, and you're not welcome here. And I says, what do you mean? I says, my money is here. I said, my account is here. She says, well, you're not welcome here, and I'm going to call the police.
That manager went into the back and dialed 911 claiming trespassing. Attorneys providing us with that call.
She told me to go away, that when she was ready, she would come up, and I don't need to be giving her the 411. Very rude.
That's when officers arrived.
I'm just trying to do my business.
Also talking with the branch manager herself.
But all she had to do was let me know what she was doing and not with the snarky attitude and threatening me with video.
Vaughn said she's been a member of Chase Bank since 2019, never made a snarky comment or recorded anyone in the 60-second interaction.
It seemed to be like a danger to me.
On body cam, officers can be heard telling the manager there's no signs posted stating no recording inside. Vaughn didn't appear aggressive, and being rude isn't a law enforcement matter.
All I could see was myself being handcuffed or dragged out or shot or something.
Vaughn overwhelmed with fear, saying she waited for her husband and then left the bank, but is now filing this lawsuit against the manager and JP Morgan Chase.
This is something that has to stop. Whether it's at a banking institution or a grocery store, movie theaters, no matter where you are, I have the right to be there.
And Vaughn was never charged with trespassing. The complaint also alleges that since September of 2021, 4 racial discrimination complaints have been made at that same location on Buckley Road. I did reach out to JP Morgan Chase for comment about those allegations and Ms. Vaughn's incident, and they briefly stated, quote, "We disagree with the allegation. That's the only comment we have."
He highlights the inherent biological differences that could create an unfair advantage, potentially compromising the essence of fair competition. The discussion extends further. Broader themes of identity and fairness are brought into the conversation, along with the societal implications of such policy decisions.
Shanique Wright believes her name may have kept her from getting job offers. When the family therapist put out a resume using the nickname Charlie, she received more callbacks than when she used her first name.
It seems like it's a little bit difficult for people to either remember my name or pronounce it correctly or remember to pronounce it correctly. And so they would often ask for, well, what's your middle name? What's your, do you have a nickname? Which definitely makes me feel ashamed of my name at times.
In one study, job applicants with ethnic-sounding names were 50% less likely to receive a callback than those with white-sounding names.
The unfortunate fact is that a lot of professionals are starting to feel like that they have to whiten their resume or remove racial descriptors from their resumes.
Andrew McCaskill is a career expert with LinkedIn, which found 25% of black professionals feel they would face retaliation for speaking out about race and inclusion at work.
Black professionals overwhelmingly responded that things that were barriers to their advancement were not having access to mentorship and sponsorship, not feeling a sense of belonging in the workplace, and finally just feeling like that there was no path for them for advancement.
Zachary Nunn says he had to compete harder than white colleagues for the same promotion.
If you're not letting black and brown folks make actual decisions that can impact systemic change, you're not doing anything.
Research from 2019 found black Americans only made up 3.2% of senior leadership roles at large companies, even though 81% of those surveyed said seeing black professionals in leadership makes the workplace feel more inclusive.
Safeguarding women's rights and ensuring fair competition in sports is vital.
Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We end today's show with the historic $2 billion payout by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to black farmers and other farmers of color who experienced discrimination when applying to the USDA's farm loan programs. The payouts finally came 2 years after Congress funded them through the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022. USDA Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack made the announcement last week.
Now, this financial assistance is not compensation for anyone's loss or the pain endured, but it is an acknowledgement by the department. And our hope is, and the President's hope is, that this financial assistance will help many farmers stay on the farm, contribute to our nation's food supply, and continue to do what they love.
This comes after the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights confirmed as long ago as 1965 that the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, discriminated against black farmers. But little was done to address the problem, and the number of black-run farms dropped 96% in the last century. By 1999, 98% of all agricultural land was owned by white people. For more, we go to Boydton, Virginia. We're joined by John Boyd, a fourth-generation black farmer and founder and president of the nonprofit National Black Farmers Association, which fought for these payouts that have now gone out. John, welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. Explain the significance of what's happening right now.
Amy, thank you so much for having me, and it's always good to spend time with you. This is a very, very historic payout for black farmers, and I see it as a huge win for myself and the National Black Farmers Association that worked on this for nearly 4 decades. So basically, 60,000 applications were turned in, 45,000 black farmers and other farmers of color have begun receiving checks this week and the latter part of last week. So it's very, very good news, and a total of $2 billion. So we've been waiting for this payout for a long time. And the MBFA went out and held 60 meetings, Amy, in FaceTime with our members. We sent out 130,000 postcards in the mail to all of our members, telling them how to apply for this. It took us, Amy, on average 3 to 3.5 hours to help each and every black farmer fill out this 40-page application. So it was a very extensive process. And so we were glad to get the news that from Stephen Benjamin at the White House actually called me and told me that the checks were actually going out to farmers around the country. So we see this as a huge significance of farmers who are facing foreclosure. We have a lot of black farmers in our organization that were facing foreclosure. So these payments are timely.
However, there is an urgent need for further research and open dialogue on the impact of transgender women competing in women's sports.
That they believe, for instance, that being a woman should be merely the first step in a wider mission to bring down capitalism. Now, I don't think most women are on board with that, and most women would be rather surprised to be utilized in this fashion. But that is very clearly and explicitly, and I quote the various scholars and writers who've been pushing this for years, this is explicitly the aim. It's a basis for madness. When people say the gay community, who are you talking about? It's like women think this. Oh, really? 50% of the species all agree on something. Blacks say this. Really? Now, this is, let me put it another way. If somebody said, I don't know, I just love the working class. Who?
Yeah.
I just love the middle class. Who? I love the upper class. Who are you talking about? And it's the same with this. Why would we be falling for this interpretation of society as depending solely or primarily on interest groups based on gender/sex, sexual orientation, race, and a bit more? Why would we be doing that? Why would we be taking the individualism out of individuals and lumping them in these demonstrably incoherent bodies that don't even exist? They don't even exist. The LGBT community, take me to your leader. Come on. And it's why, as I say, you can always predict exactly who is going to latch onto the latest claim. When, for instance, the big bearded man with male genitalia wins the women's weightlifting competition, you can predict with 100% accuracy who is going to say, yeah, what's the problem with that? And the people who are going to say, I'm not sure Clive the big weightlifter should be winning the women's category. You can predict it. And the people who say, why have you got a problem with that, bigot, are always the same people who believed in the past that our societies needed to be pulled apart in another fashion. And now they'd like to do it in this fashion. It has this hideous red interior which keeps exposing itself as desiring not a better relationship between ourselves and our environment, but, for instance, the end of capitalism. this new morality we're trying to construct relies on us pretending we know about things that we don't know about trans, and simultaneously demands that we pretend not to know about things that we all knew till yesterday.
Striking a balance between respecting individual rights and preserving fairness in competition is a delicate and intricate matter. The outcomes of these decisions could potentially transform the landscape of women's sports and the milestones achieved within it.